this is that every single one of our assignments, we want to have a little title bumper on it that says, hey, this is what the project is. Here's whose project it is, so Sean Sarcona. Here's the project number, assignment number 2. Here's what the project is, page transitions, or whatever the assignment is, okay? Now, before we get into doing the final one, I want to cover some other things that we're going to have to go over first. So today will be a play day, getting used to what the process is, and then next class after the test, we'll get into actually making that final banner, okay? And then just like I talked about before, you can go beyond. So I'm going to give you a sample of my banner that I'm doing for mine. Some of the ones I showed the first day where I showed examples of other students, theirs look nothing like mine, and that was fine because I want you to think about customizing it, because this may be something that you use later on down the line, okay? All right, so the purpose of the thing that's going to be different in here is that we're going to be playing with animating stuff in a different way, a little bit more organic way. Very similar to what we've done, but we're just going to be arranging things a little bit different, okay? So don't follow along this first time. Watch it up here. Take notes. Don't write down every single thing I do. Just write down like the highlights, okay? And then you will do one together, okay? So I call these things blips, okay? The thing that we're going to add on to our title sequence is going to be called a blip. And what it is essentially just like a little added piece of animation, right? So I could have a ball hitting the ground, and then that's okay. But a ball hitting the ground and then something happening when it does hit the ground, that's the blip, all right? So that's what I want to create. So before, we would create, remember those big wipes, right? The big circle would come out and it would wipe the screen, or the squares would wipe the screen, or we'd do the circles, that kind of thing. So I'm going to go to an ellipse here. Now for something like this that I'm going to be creating, my composition actually doesn't need to be rectangular. This is something I would add on to an animation, not be an animation in itself, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my composition settings. Again, hotkey Control K, typically I'll hit Control K. I'm going to make this a 512 by 512. Now because this is vector, it doesn't matter. I can make this a trillion by a trillion. If After Effects went that high, it wouldn't matter, okay? I still need to be big enough that I could see it. 512 is typically a good size to work with. All right. So now here's what's nice about this is that when I go to my circle, my ellipse tool, and I double click, I don't have to reproportion it. Remember before it would come out as an ellipse? Because it's already circular, it automatically makes a perfect circle, which is awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the stroke off of this for a second. There we go. And I'm going to make this white. Perfect. All right. And I'm just going to animate this growing. Okay. Remember that each shape layer has 2 spots that we could animate scale, right? There's this spot here where I hit the S key and that gets to scale. Or I can open this up to the contents ellipse transform here, and there's this scale. It does not matter which one I do. I just have to make sure that I remember which one. Typically I'm going to hit S because that's the easiest one to get to, so I use that. So I'm going to start off at 0, keyframe it, go up to 10, put it at 100. Perfect. Then I will easy ease. Again, this is review, right? We've had 3 days of this. Setting keyframes, easy easing, and then going to graph editor. You guys are tired today. So I want this to go pretty slow and then fast. Is that what I want to do? Oops. Still have this on. There we go. Okay, that's perfect. Okay. All right, so I like the way that moves. All right, so that, everything so far we've done. We've done that before. I make it bigger and then we have a page transition, right? That's exactly what a page transition would be. So here's where the different part is going to be. I'm going to duplicate this. And then I'm going to take that duplicate and I'm going to offset it 1. And I'm going to, just for now, fill this with black. Okay, let me offset it a couple frames. There we go. Alright, so now watch what I get. Alright, you see how I get this like little like blippity type thing? End of my work area. Okay, so that's a blip. Now that's one element of a blip. Typically we want them to be a little bit fancier and a little bit more things going on, but for now that's perfect, exactly what I want. Now the only issue I have with this currently is at the very end of this. Here's the very end of it. Do you see this little white line right here? Okay, I have 2 circles that are expanded, and because they're the exact same size, I'm getting a little bit of fringe going around it. Alright, so I could either take the size of this one down, or I could add, let's say, a black scale to this, or a black stroke to this one. I typically will just go for a black stroke on the other one. So there, and I'm going to just take this down to like 2 pixels, and that should be good. Nope, maybe 1 more pixel. I can barely see it on mine. You can probably not see it at all. Yeah, you can't see it, but there's still some tiny dots there. All right, so ignore, if you can see it, ignore it. Okay. All right, so now it totally disappears. So now comes the next part. This would actually be applied to something, right? That's what I said before. So I want to go, I'm just going to show you what would happen later on, is that we would apply this to an animation. So I would go into here. I would make a new solid, let's say. That's a gorgeous color. And then I have a new comp, right? I have my comp 1, and then I have blip. So I'm going to drop my blip into comp 1 on top of this solid, and then I'm going to hit play. All right, not the effect I want. What I want to happen is I want that white ring, but I want it to be transparent. Okay, I want that to go away. Now, if I were to just put a white stroke on there and expand it up, that would give me the white stroke, but I would still have something at the end of it. Okay, so I need to do something to that original blip so that it does become transparent at the end of it, right? Yes, ma'am. Sort of. Okay, we're not animating the opacity, we're going to do it a different way. Okay, so we're going to do what's called a track matte. A track matte is basically, I can take this layer and use that as transparency for a different layer. Okay, so remember from Photoshop you had layer masks, which was the little black and white thing off to the side, and then you had clipping masks, which was when you had one layer, then you had another layer and it was kind of like offset. Okay, maybe? No? Yes. Okay. That's what we're going to do. There's a button down here called Toggle Switches and Modes. This gets us into the menu that allows us to do that. So I click that little button, and then here's my track matte. Now you'll see this layer has a track matte option. This other layer does not have a track matte option. The reason for that is the layer above is the one that can be a matte or a mask. This layer doesn't have anything above it, so they can't have a mask attached to it. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this layer, I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say alpha matte shape 2. Okay? Alright, now that didn't do exactly what I wanted. Let's try the other way. Alpha inverted. There we go. Okay? Now it looks exactly the same, right? There's no difference in what we're seeing. Now let me jump back to my comp 1. Now look at the end result. Now we have transparency on there. Okay? So what's happening is that white mask is going like this, getting really big. Okay? The other shape is getting really big, and as it does, it's basically subtracting. It's basically a mask for the other one. So once it gets big enough, it just hides it. All right? So that might take you a few tries to figure out, like, holy cow, what is going on? What do I have to click? What's the order? It's super simple. If you just keep in mind, whatever is on top, that's going to be not seen at all. That's going to be the cutout. And whatever's on the bottom is going to be your actual shape. Okay? So here's the initial shape that I have. There's the other one. Now this is what's cool about creating this little blip. Is let's say I don't like how thick this is. That's like incredibly thick there. I can go back to my blip, zoom in, And I'm just going to drag this back one knock. Okay, so I'm back one frame. So you'll see by me going back one frame, what it does, it makes that black one animate a little bit faster, a little bit sooner. So we don't get as big of a ring right there. Okay, the other thing I can do is take that stroke up on the black one, and you'll see how I can then start eating away at that other one. That was a little bit too quick. Yep, see, it's like already gone by the time it gets there. So let me pull that down some. And I could animate the stroke too. There we go. That's good. Cool. All right. So now that I have this blip here inside the other comp, I can actually start combining blips together to create different effects. Okay. So I'm going to scale it down so it's kind of tinier. And just so we have something happening, I'm just going to make a new rectangle here. There we go. All right, so visually, we don't need this, or we don't actually need this. It just helps kind of see what the blip is used for. Okay, so I'm just going to animate this little thing here. I'm going to set a keyframe. I'm going to go up to, let's say, there. Pull it down. There. All right, so I just have a couple keyframes here. This thing is just slamming. Oops. Slamming down on the ground. I'm just going to speed it up so it happens really quick at the end. A little faster. There we go. Good. And you know what? Let's grab a sound effect. It'll add to the fun of it. Nope, a little bit more. There we go. That seems to match. Cool. All right, so now I'm going to take my blip and drag it to the top. I'm actually going to make this a little bit skinnier. This looks a little bit too big for that. There we go. Okay. Then I can take my blip here, and I can move it down to the bottom, and I can offset where it happens. So right there is where the ground hits. Cool. Right? So now we can see the effect of this. We can see that this thing comes in, it hits, and then we have this little like shockwave type thing. Right? But then I can also take this blip, duplicate it a couple times, maybe offset them a little bit, scale these down a little bit more. Let's say this one's 15, and this one is maybe 10. That might be too small, we'll see. And then I'm also going to offset their time slightly. Right? So now we're getting these like nice little cartoony type effects when this thing hits. We get these little blips. And then we could, of course, not that this even makes sense that there'd be water drop sounds, but we'll just grab water drop sounds. Whoops. And the water drop sound actually starts right there. And I'm going to hit L and then just knock this levels down. This is the volume of this. So I'm just going to knock it down a little bit. That's too much. -8 maybe?
So 1L is audio levels and 2Ls is audio wave?
Yes. There we go. Now let's just set a little work area right there. There you go. Right? So we've created this one shape that just goes bloop like that, and all of this stuff works together. Now watch what happens if I say I'm going to take this audio clip and just cut it from there, go into my blip, and paste it into here. Right? Maybe a little bit right there. All right, that looks good. Now I go back to my comp, because the blip comp has been duplicated twice, right? So we have 3 layers. We should get 3 sounds, right? And I can still go into each one of these. Oops. If I hit L correctly. Oh, come on. What are you doing? Why aren't you showing me that? Oh. No, that should work. All right. I'll go the other way. I'll go up to audio, and I will go to stereo mixer. Left level, right level, sure. Just take this down. Oops. 50, 50. There we go. So now they all have 3 different sounds, okay? Or 3 different levels. I'm surprised, though, that... Oh, see, now it shows it, of course. Added it to it. All right, so now I can go back to that. I don't know why I wasn't showing it before, because it's stupid, maybe. And now we can just go here and then just reset this to whatever. Okay, so that's what the essence of a blip is. Now, this blip can be done multiple ways, okay, or we can do multiple things with it. This is probably the simplest. You'll see these things like all over the place. If you go online, you'll see like any of those page transitions we looked at. Typically, they will have these kind of blip things in there, right? So now I'm going to do another one just so you can see it. So this will be lines blip. And again, I'm going to go 512 by 512. I still stick to 3 seconds. I can always cut it, always add more time. And with this one, I'm going to go with, not you, I'm going to go with my pen tool, okay? I want to get basically like a starburst type thing where I would get these like shooting out things from the center, okay? So I'm going to hit Control R. Remember I said we use the rulers at some point. I want to line this up. I can't see where my stuff is, so I'm going to bring up the info. That way as I drag a guide, I can see the guide position right there. So half of 512 is what? 256. There we go. So that is exactly half. I don't need to make it 512. I come from 3D, and typically we make stuff in 512, 1024, 2048 texture sizes. You can make it 500. It's fine. All right, so now I'm going to lock my guides so that I don't accidentally select them or move them. And now I can just draw a shape from here to there. And then I can move it over because I probably didn't have snap guides on. Nope, I did. It just didn't do it. All right, so just scoot that right there. Perfect. There's that one. Awesome. Okay, so now with this pen tool here, I'm going to take the stroke and just make it white so we can see it. That helps. We can go into... down here. I can go into my stroke settings and change some of the properties of it. So if I don't want the butt cap on here, I could change it to a round cap, which is what I'm going to do. There we go. Cool. And then I'm just going to animate this using that trim. So I add trim paths again. And what I want to do is very similar to the other one. I want to start at the center and work my way out. Okay? So I'm going to figure out what the end is. The end should be the out part, yes. Okay. So I reset that. I hit a key on the end. I'm going to go up to 10 and put it up. All right, so now I can hide my guides because I'm kind of done looking at them. Show guides. Okay, so there's my animation. That's super slow. Let's speed this up. Okay, now what I want to happen is kind of like a... Star Wars phaser gun, right? It shoots up, it hits, and then the other end follows it. That's what I want to happen because it's just coming out looks stupid. So I'm also going to animate the start, but I'm going to wait a couple frames and then animate the start, okay? If I animate the start at the exact same time I animate the end, it won't do anything. It'll just be like gone because they're both at the same spot. So I need to go a couple frames, turn the start on, then turn the end on, or turn the end keyframe up. So now we get this. Okay, so now we get this nice little blip type thing. Bloop. That's how you know if it's a blip, is if you make that sound effects and it works. Bloop. Then you know it's a blip. If it was really long, it wouldn't be a blip. Bloop. See, it doesn't work. So it has to be inside that range there. That's good. All right. And some of these you'll find that the easy ease isn't going to do a whole lot just because our time is so tight. But still do it, especially just getting the habit of it. It might be something subtle that just adds a little bit more pizzazz to it. There we go. That's sweet. Okay. Cool. Right? So there is one blip. Now, for this blip, this is another thing we could do. This is another awesome thing. If I go to add here and I go to repeater, there we go. See, we have 3 blips now. That's pretty sweet. I'm going to go to my transform repeater, and inside here, this is how it's actually repeating it. So what it's doing is it's making a copy and moving it over 100 pixels to the right. That's what that says. And 0 pixels. So I'm going to take that 100 to 0. And I'm going to go to rotation and put in, for now, I'll put in like 45. So now I get this sweet effect. Right. That's pretty awesome. Now if I want more of these, I just go to my copies and I just add more copies. Now the idea with this is that figure out how many copies you need for your circle if you are doing a circle, right? So if I have a perfect circle, how many degrees is that? 360, perfect. And then if I have them rotated every 45 degrees, how many of those could I fit into a perfect circle? I do. 8, right? So we should have 8 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So there's no point in me having more copies than I need. Okay, so if I go to 7, you'll see that there's that. If I go to 8, it's perfectly right on it. If I go to 9, it looks exactly the same, but now there's 2 on top of the first one. Okay, not a huge deal, but it still takes processing power to do that 9th one. Okay, how do I get the repeater? The same spot that I did the, whoopsie, let me just reset that to 0. The same spot I did the trim path, there's a repeater right there. Okay. We could also do start and end opacity. So I could take the end opacity and put it to 0. Right? So now they have different opacities on each one of those. So if I didn't want everything to be exactly the same, I could do that. Now the cool thing about this is that it's pretty quick, right? I hit the repeater, change some copies. If I decided that I wanted more, I could take my rotations down to 22.5. And then how many copies would I have then? 16. Because I just half the one, so I double the other. Right? So very quickly I can create a bunch of copies of this. The thing that I don't like about using the repeater is it's very exact. All of these are exactly positioned. They're all exactly the same shape. They all happen at exactly the same time. This is an option. You can definitely do stuff like this. Okay? Now I'm going to show you another way to do it that doesn't look so staticky boring. So I'm just going to duplicate it and hide the first one. And I'll rename this. I hit the enter key and I say repeater streak. Perfect. And then on this one, I'm going to go back to my repeater and just delete it. So I just have my original animation, just that. Okay. Now here's where I'm going to use exactly what we did on the page transitions. I'm just going to duplicate it. I duplicate, and then I can rotate it 45 degrees, duplicate it, rotate it, another 45 degrees, duplicate it, rotate it, another 45 degrees. Okay, so I'll just stick there and we'll just pretend that's good. All right, so now we basically get the same exact animation we had before, but now I can offset them. right? That feels a little bit more natural to me than everything being exactly the same, okay? Sweet. Okay, then I can go back to my original comp 1, drop my lines blip in here too, and I scrub until I see that happening there. I move this down. I'm going to give it a little rotation. Maybe offset that a little bit. Just want to see what it's doing. A little bit more that way. All right, let's try that. Right? So we've taken something that could be a very boring animation, like, oops, I just got rid of everything. Shape layer 1, there we go. I'll turn my audio off too. All right, this is a very boring animation, just this. And obviously the sound effects add something. It actually makes us feel like we're hitting it. Side note, if you watch any of boxing movies or fighting movies and you turn the audio off, all the fight or hits look like they miss because the sound effect isn't there, and so our mind perceives it as not actually hitting. It's amazing. We add these little blips, and now that adds a little bit more realism to it. I'm going to just make this white. I think that would look better white. There we go. Okay, so that's what blips are. That's the essence of it. We can do a million different shapes with this. What I want you to do is play around with that. Start off with the circle one, okay? And then you'll do the line one. And then if you get done with those, do another circle one, and then do another line one, and then try different methods of doing your own type of blip. Okay? Now let's do this circle one together, just so we have one under our belt that we can do as a group. So what's the first thing that we should do? No, first thing we should do is go to our project and copy that project folder. Remember we created that the first day, first working day? Remember we have that template folder? We should copy that template folder. So I just hold down Control and drag it so I have a copy of that. Or you can hit Control C, Control V, and then I rename it to be Sarcona Title Sequence. Or just title in the sequence part. Control C and then Control V. Okay. Then you open up After Effects, and then, oops, you should have your template project there that you could open up. All right, remember our template project has all those folders already created for us, so that as we make new comps, we can put them into the comp folder. As we bring in audio, we can drop it in the audio folder. As we have solids and whatever else, we can put those in the correct folder. Okay, so inside of that title sequence folder that we just copied, I have that template project. So I can just double click it, or I can go to File, Open in After Effects, and get that. And then I will save this as my title sequence. Okay, so I'm just opening up that template project and then just saving it as Sarcona _ title sequence. That way I know which one is the one I want to work on. Cool. All right, so what's our first step? New composition. Hotkey is Control N, right? Also, remember you have like 5 fingers on your hand. So if you have a hotkey that you can reach with one hand, do that. Like Control Z, there's a lot of people that hit Control and then they move the other hand off the mouse to hit Z. That seems ridiculous. Just it's right there, Control Z. Okay, even Control N. My hand is, I measured this one time, 9 inches from thumb to finger. So that's pretty long. I can reach pretty much all the way to the O in Control, so I can reach a lot of stuff with that one. There's also a Control on the other side, whatever. All right, so what size do we want this to be? How many widths and how many heights? What was that? No. This is our blip. Our composition, our animation, our end thing would be 960, but the blip one, remember, we're going to make it square. 512 by 512. Perfect. Okay. Or you can do 500 by 500. The size doesn't matter as long as you go big enough that you can see it. If I went 4 pixels by 4 pixels, I couldn't see that. If I went 7,000 by 7,000, I could see it very good, but it's going to run really slow. 512 is just a nice number. Okay. Square pixels, right? 30 frames per second. And our duration is 300. Not 30, 00, or 3. 300. And then you can also give it a name at the top. You can call it Circle Blip 01. 001. All right, we have a composition. It's 512 by 512, 3 seconds long. Now what? Make a circle, right? So we go up to the shape layer. We go to the ellipse tool. We double click it. We got a circle. All right, now what do we do with the circle? What are we animating on it? Scale. All right, so we're going to start off at 0, right? So we don't see it at all. Click a little stopwatch to say we're setting keys. We go up to, I think I lowered mine. I think it was at 10, but then I brought it back. So I'm just going to go to 7 frames, okay? And then put it to 100. You have a question, Carvisha? No, you're stretching. Okay, then we should be good after that, right? So we have our keyframe scale. Start off at 0, go up to 100. It gets bigger, no surprise. Easy ease. And then we go to the graph editor. Make sure you change your graph editor to the speed graph and not the value graph. Remember, you have your sticky note of everything I have to do every time I walk into the classroom. That's one of them. I'm not going to give you guys any long holidays anymore. You're so tired. All right, so we have our animation. It's wonderful. The cool thing about pre-composing or making little compositions and then adding them to other stuff is we have one spot. So this circle that we're going to create is in one spot. So if we don't like this animation a year from now, we can come back to this one composition. There's 2 keyframes here, 2 keyframes there. We tweak them, and then the whole thing gets updated. Okay? All right, so now that we have this, boop, now what do we need to do? Somebody say duplicate it. Perfect. So we duplicate that layer. And then what do we do with that layer that we've just duplicated? Offset it. Now on mine, I think I went 2 frames, and that would have been too far, but it's something that you have to play with. The speed of your circle animating is going to be dictated by that. Don't look at mine and say he moved it 2, it has to be 2, okay? Your artists, look at it and see what's going to look good. And if you have a question, ask me and I will tell you what looks good. All right. So now we have two of these right on top of each other, right? So now we need to turn on that track matte button. So you're going to click down on the toggle switches and modes until you see the little track matte options right here. Okay, right in the center of that you should see Turk Matte. And then all we should have to do is take that bottom one and change it to the alpha inverted. Okay, now when you do this the first time and you're like, I don't know if it worked, I don't know what it did, try to be on a frame where you can actually see what's happening. If I change this back to no track matte, I'm in the middle, so both of my layers are basically on top of each other, so that when I do change this to alpha inverted, something happens. And I can say, oh, perfect, that's exactly what I wanted to happen. And then I can hit play and verify that it does do what I want it to do. Yep. But obviously those two colors don't show up because we're only going to get one color here. So you can take this composition once we're done and duplicate the whole composition and have different color shapes inside there. Okay, so just because we're doing one here, we can repurpose this and have a bunch of different colors, right? All right, so now we can't see it too good on my screen. Maybe if I hit buttons on here, you might be able to see it. You can't see it, okay. You can see it on yours though, I'm sure. If you go to the end of your animation, you'll probably see that there's a thin line going around your stuff, okay? Do you remember how we fixed that? Right, the outline. So I need to take that outline path and just make it bigger. Now here's where people get confused because I have two layers. Which one is controlling the transparency? It's a 50-50 shot, someone guess. The top one, perfect, okay? So that's where we want to change it. So we want to go to the top layer and just make that outline just 2 pixels thicker. That's all we have to do. So we go to that one, mine's at 5, so guess what I'm going to make it 2. That's not too hard, right? 7. Now if you go too high, you go like 20 pixels up, you're not going to see anything. That thickness is going to be just overbearing. You're not going to see any of your animation here at the beginning. Perfect. Our first blip, that's awesome. Okay, now if we decide after we've looked at this and we're like, I'm really not sure if that's as fast as I want to go or as slow as I want to go, remember, push the boundaries of how far you think it should go and then dial it back, right? So on this one, it's pretty perfect because I'm pretty perfect, but let's pretend, why are you laughing? Let's pretend that it wasn't, okay? I'm going to take these 2 keyframes at the end. Notice how I can marquee them and move them together as one. I'm going to grab both keyframes and I'm going to go crazy with it all the way up here. 1 second is way too long for that blip to happen. I already know that. But I want to see, basically I'm cleansing my palette before I start tweaking it, okay? So now I'm going to rewind it. Okay, that's horrible. Then I can start dialing it back. Maybe I'll go to 20. I'm going to set my work area also. All right, I'm getting there. I'm going to go down to here. And that actually looks pretty decent the way that is, okay? Now, each one of these will have its own purpose. Now, you have to keep in mind my little sound effects that I had, which was little, like, blips, right? So if I have a blip, like the little raindrop, this actually works better. Being a little bit smaller and a little bit quicker because it's like a bloop, bloop, like that. But if I had something that's like a maybe like a warbly, like whoosh, whoosh, that might be more there, right? So keep in mind that if you have sound effects, our animations have to kind of customize to that sound effect. We can't always go the other way around. If this was Hollywood, we would give this to the sound guy, and the sound guy would make sounds that sound perfectly for what our animation is. Unless you're comfortable doing that, don't do it. Just work around it, okay? Now I'm going to give you a couple more things to kind of consider as you're like looking at this, okay? One, use sound effects because they do help. Even if like I'm up here and I'm doing the sound effect while it's playing, that does help, okay? It's not just me being a goof. The other thing is Audition. No. Audition is a program that comes with Adobe. It's on all the computers, so you can plug your headphones in and listen. But this is, I'm going to go to my downloads. I'm going to grab my sound effects. I'm going to put them into my audio folder for my comp. There we go. And then what I can do is bring these audio files into Audition. Okay, and this is where I can see and I can edit and I can adjust properties of this thing. So here's my sound effect, right? I can go into this and I can go to time and pitch and I can say, I always forget which one. I think it's this one. That's not it. And it always gives you 3 guesses. It's either one of these or that one's this one. 2 guesses this time. That's a good one. All right, so I hit play here. So this was the pitch shifter. Right? So now the sound is different. Here it was before. Right? And then here it is now. I can adjust. You don't have to know what any of these sliders do. You just play with them until you get something that sounds cool. Right? So you can adjust any of those. Angry gerbil. Let's see what that sounds like. It does sound angry. Stretch. Right? So what's cool about this is that you can take one sound effect and you can turn it into something else. And I think that's like pretty awesome because we can use that throughout all of our animations. Now you're customizing these things for your animation, so we're not starting from scratch, but we're definitely getting closer to what we need for our animation as opposed to going the other way and forcing our animation into the sound effect. Okay, so I could take that sound effect and all I would do is, let's say I modified this, I would just go and save it as, I save it as a wave. It'll give you basically the same settings that it already was. So I would just say modified blip, okay, or raindrop, or whatever you want to call it. And then I would just import it here, drag it down there, then I would have my sound effect. Okay, so what I want you to do for the rest of today is make another circle one again, so it's fresh in your mind. Make sure your keyframes are easy eased. You've gone in the graph editor. Once you've made another one of these, then make the line one. Make one with a repeater. Make one without the repeater where you're just duplicating it and rotating it around. If it helps, draw out what you want to happen. I want a line to shoot like this, and then like this, and then like that, and then like this. The line one that I had, let me save this so I don't delete it. There it is. The line one that I had right here, typically what I'll do is I'll have my initial line one that comes up, and I will save that in a comp, and I will bring a new comp, or I'll bring that into a new comp, and then duplicate it around. That way my line is always the same. If I need to change it, I can go to that original one and change it there. But I can make an entire ring of these. I can make a 180 ring. I can make a 45. I can do a whole bunch of different things. That's a 90. I can make a 90 with it. Or a whole bunch of different things with it. Okay? So this is just the starting point of adding these like little effects to it. Cool. And then not to blow your mind with that.